Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on Enrollify that I know you'll love. Breaking Silos aims to showcase the remarkable work of marketing professionals and their non marketing colleagues from different departments across campus who come together to achieve common goals, implement new initiatives, enhance the student experience, and foster better collaboration among teams. Hosted by Shane Biglini, who leads marketing at Muhlenberg College, each episode of Breaking Silos will feature a marketer and their non marketing colleague to talk about that partnership. This unique format will inspire marketers to try new things and connect with colleagues in new ways, while also allowing non marketing professionals an inside look at some of the most collaborative projects in higher ed marketing. New episodes drop every other Wednesday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Breaking Silos wherever you get your podcasts.
We started a great conversation about social media and employer branding on episode 20 with Jenny Lee Fowler. Well, let's continue that conversation by looking at social intelligence with Liz Gross. I'll tell you about Liz in just a little bit. But like potential students who are investigating campuses, higher ed job seekers are also investigating campuses. Current employees are talking about their experiences on campus, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And where they're doing it? Yep, they're doing it on social media and other platforms. And then there are the online users who are voicing their opinions about campuses where they used to work. Yep, the good, the bad, and definitely the ugly. However, too many administrators at colleges and universities are unaware of how this activity impacts the image of their institutions. So let me tell you about Liz Gross, and she's going to take us through this conversation. She's the founder and CEO of Campus Sonar. Liz is a social intelligence expert who's also an award-winning author and strategist. She has 20 years of experience in strategic social listening programs. And oh, by the way, Liz is just cool. All right, let's talk to her in this episode of I Want to Work There. Welcome to I Want to Work There, a podcast that helps colleges and universities boost their brands as employers of choice. I'm your host, Eddie Francis, brand strategy consultant for Edify Ventures. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in talent recruitment and retention, human resources, and marketing and communications inside and outside of higher education. I Want to Work There is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals just like you grow, and explore our other shows at enrollify.org, or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of I Want to Work There. Joining me is Liz Gross, the one and only CEO and founder of Campus Sonar. Liz, how are you?
I am breathing. It's a busy spring, but I'm doing great. Excited to chat with you today.
One of the things about you is that I have been fascinated about the work that you have done with social media. We've already talked on the podcast about using social media to attract talent and tactics to attract talent with our good friend Jenny Lee Fowler. And so now I want to get a little bit more into social intelligence. And so when it comes down to social intelligence, first of all, let's have a definition. What is social intelligence? How did you get into it?
Social intelligence is using online conversation data to understand the thoughts, opinions, and behaviors of an audience or a market or perceptions around a brand.
Mm.
And it uses those insights to impact business decisions. So I used to talk about social listening a lot, and social listening is more of a monitoring approach, like make sure we hear what's going on about us.
Hmm.
Social intelligence is another evolution, and we're seeing this in multiple industries outside of higher education, of using social listening research methodology as another organizational market research option. So it's using the internet as an always-on focus group and answering complex or important organizational research questions from that data set.
So let's start with the social listening part. How did you get into social listening? What made your interest grow in that?
Initially, I was very interested into it going all the way back to, I want to say 2008 or 2009, when
Hmm.
I was working at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So my professional journey kind of mirrored the evolution of social media in higher education and in society as a whole. So I was interested in social listening back in 2008, 2009 as a way to understand student perceptions as well as customer service concerns
Mm.
specific to the university residential housing at the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee. And then as I evolved in my career, I was the marketing director for the University of Wisconsin Waukesha. And then it became more of how do we understand our local immediate community based on the networks that are being created online. We were in the Milwaukee area, which was a really, really early and deep adopter of Twitter in the
Mhm.
in the aughts,
Yep.
and there was a lot of conversation to be had just on that network alone that could be understood and leveraged with social listening. And then over the next 5 or so years, as I moved off campus into higher ed adjacent roles, I started to use enterprise social listening tools that would search the internet at scale in a complex way to understand more about beliefs, behaviors, or overall brand health. And that's when I really started to kind of go back in my brain to what I would have done on campus with that knowledge and that ability. And this is all happening at the same time as we all started to become very concerned about public trust in higher
Mm. Hmm.
education.
Hmm.
And I believe firmly that understanding the online conversation is a key way to not only understand what's driving public trust, but how others are influenced in the online spaces, whether that has to do with their choice of education or where they want to go to work.
Mm. Okay, so can I take a quick side note here? I love that you said the aughts because it's so funny when people are like, well, in the early 2000s, and I'm like, well, we're still in the early 2000s. So, um,
Yep.
when did you? So when did you really start to shift to social intelligence?
So we started to shift to social intelligence at Campus Sonar before social intelligence was even a phrase
Yeah.
that was used widely. But we shifted internally faster than the higher education market has shifted. So I would say we were doing social intelligence esque work in 2017, 2018. One of our first ever research projects was understanding how people talk about stopping out of college online, specifically on Reddit. That is a
Mm.
social
Mm.
intelligence
Oh yeah.
project.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the clients who wanted to work with us in 2018, 19, 20, and even 2021 were thinking about social listening because that's the only thing they would ever be equipped to do on campus on their own. So they wanted, regular monitoring reports and an understanding of how many people are talking about them. And we've really been pushing the industry to understand more about social intelligence as an overall opportunity, with social listening being an ongoing benefit
Yeah.
of social intelligence. So as a firm, the work we've been doing with clients has shifted much more into the social intelligence space as of like late 2022, early 2023. We're doing some national work now related to public trust, related to
Hmm.
pipelines for marginalized students in certain academic areas, related to students' experience with equity, diversity, inclusion on campus. Those are all social intelligence.
Even right now, I'm thinking that if I want to apply for a job at a certain campus and I'm noticing the social media chatter, that is kind of helping me make my decision as to whether or not I even want to apply for a job there.
Absolutely.
And I may look at a university with a big recognizable big football Saturday brand thinking, "Oh, that's going to look really sexy on my resume." But looking at the chatter, I'm thinking, "Well, wait a minute, the chatter isn't so great." And I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of a halfway candidate, whereas with a smaller institution may not be as recognized, and the social media chatter is more favorable. And I'm doing my own social intelligence work, right? Informally, I'm all in with that one. And I'm hoping that they call me, and I'm hoping that that's the job I'm seriously considered for. Whereas for the other, if I'm the second or third or fourth candidate down, I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, I'll take this job, which really is, something that I get very concerned about with colleges and universities about the quality of job candidates that they get. So this is really interesting, the shift that's happened with you, with social intelligence. So before we shift back into where I really want to go with the conversation about talent attraction and talent experience and how social intelligence plays into that, in preparing for the conversation, Liz, you told me that Campus Sonar focuses on strategy, as opposed to what a lot of people would probably think that you're here for crisis response. And you told me that institutions have approached you, and I just want to get an idea, and I want people to hear about this. Why is it that you prefer to focus on strategy versus something like crisis response?
I see social intelligence as a market research methodology that has long term value. And as a bonus, it has utility in a crisis.
Hmm.
But it has the most utility in a crisis when you have the full context of what is going on, because context is key to understanding online conversation. So
Yeah.
individual mentions or spikes or public social uprisings, social media uprisings
Mm.
have value within the context of the overall conversation and the goals of the campus. And jumping in a last minute crisis situation to just report out metrics and numbers and sentiment can be helpful, but it's not nearly as helpful unless you have the full picture.
Hmm.
Uh, it also helps to recognize that there are absolutely offline implications and utilities of social intelligence. When we're brought in a crisis, it's often viewed as a social media problem, not an actual problem. And we want to make sure that
Hmm.
there's an understanding that those two things can be true at the same time. And then lastly, if you're using social listening in a crisis within the context of ongoing social intelligence, you also have the value of trends over time. So you can very quickly answer, in this situation that we have all of our eyeballs on, how different is it from a normal day, week, or month in our brand or organization's conversation? How much of the overall conversation is related to this crisis? That's all things you know when you have more valuable trends over time data. And when you use social intelligence on an ongoing basis and you have those trends over time, you also develop the ability to more confidently look into the future and predict trends as you start to see things moving in different directions. So overall, it's just much more strategically valuable when you have the look back, the in the moment, and the potential to look forward, instead of just jumping in the moment and figuring out what you might be able to understand at that time.
You're listening to I Want to Work There. I'm Eddie Francis, and we're talking to Liz Gross. She's the founder and CEO of Campus Sonar. So let's jump into this talent thing, faculty and staff. I am dying to hear about this. So, when it comes to faculty and staff and some of the chatter that you have seen from with different colleges and universities over the course of your career, and when it comes to your work with Campus Sonar, what kinds of sentiments have you seen? Depend, and I know it changes from situation to situation, but overall, what kinds of things have you seen, or what kinds of conversations have you seen from faculty and staff on social media?
They run the gamut, and I'm going to start positive and high level,
Okay.
and we'll do a couple of examples and then end with the oh, look out part.
Okay. Great. That's awesome.
So I don't think most folks listening to this would know that if you were to look at a year of online conversation about a college or university and rank the top most frequent contributors to that conversation, staff and faculty are most often going to be within your top 10. And
Hmm.
we've done that for at least 100 institutions. And the surprised look when they see faculty in their most vocal voices is fascinating to see. So they're out there.
Hmm.
They're often talking about their day to day work. There's generally a lot of celebration of athletics teams. They might be highlighting their community engagement opportunities or promoting their professional work, whether that is research or a conference presentation or something else that they're working on. Because we've all been taught to some extent that your personal brand matters. And
Yep.
for an individual, that personal brand is adjacent to the employer brand. Some folks choose to highlight their employer alongside themselves, others very purposely leave it out. So that's another fascinating thing to see. There's a couple of really specific examples that came up when I asked my team, like, what are the really interesting faculty and staff patterns you started to see that I'm really interested in exploring more now that we started looking at this. So we have seen campuses that are prompting faculty to engage in public forums, whether that's with prospective students or about stories that impact about the impact of their research. And two interesting examples that then start to build a trend. Dr. Brian Feinstein at Rosalind Franklin University is active on X. And when I talk about these faculty that are active, they're not online celebrities. They generally have like low thousands number
Mm-hmm.
of connections. Dr. Feinstein talks about his research in the Sexuality, Health, and Gender Lab. And then he also talks about the ongoing application review process for the clinical psych PhD program. And his social media activity attracts attention from all different corners of his discipline. He's got national research organizations, academics, students, and all of those folks that are engaged in the conversation with and about him are either prospective employees or revenue sources for the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
institution. So I look at that, and then separately in another institution's conversation, I see Stephen Jawamal at LaSalle University, who's a communications professor. He is also active on X and other platforms, again, low thousands followers, really positively engaged about teaching and learning as part of his job, but particularly with LGBTQ plus students. And looking back at Dr. Feinstein's work in the Sexuality, Health, and Gender Lab, it's very LGBTQ plus focused. So I was starting to see this theme that I believe supports what we've seen in general in the data, is that feeling safe in your identity is extremely important to employees, especially those in Gen Z who consider workplace safety to be one of their number one concerns, especially for
Mm.
people who hold some sort of historically marginalized identity. So seeing an online community associated with a university that reflects a welcoming environment for them helps answer that question of, will I be safe if I work here?
Hmm.
So we start to see these interesting trends when the faculty or staff's activity are about not only their work, but who they are or who they
Mm.
serve.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting trend that came up when I polled my team. Other examples are when we see faculty activity directly tied to brand priorities, either intentionally or unintentionally, and the ability to understand that and know how it contributes or detracts from an institution's reputation. Uh, Early on in Campus Sonar, so this would be some of that early social intelligence work, we did research for a large private university. This would have been, I think, 2018, 2019, and they had a lot of conversation about them. They're talked about all over the place. Definitely one of those brands you'd want to put on your resume. We were able to see what faculty were talking about just organically online, and if that aligned with the brand pillars that the university was trying to refresh, to identify ways that they could amplify in brand aligned ways what was already happening with the faculty. Because faculty, more than any employee, does not want to be told, you should help us market the institution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But if what they are doing and are authentically interested in and passionate in has that effect,
Mm-hmm.
it can be amplified. And you can find evidence of that through social listening and social intelligence. The other example about that is more proactive. We've been working with a large professional school for a couple of years now to identify the faculty activity online with their dean's areas of research focus. And we've noticed that when faculty are discussing their research in social spaces and engaging people within those spaces, it is more accessible than the traditional promotion of research. If you
Mm-hmm.
think about the way most university comms offices will promote research,
Yeah.
it'll be a press release or a quick interview. And these are actually interactive ways where not only are they engaging potential future faculty or employees of the institution, they're engaging their broader community in understanding how the institution's work is impacting the public. But on the flip side, we also see conversations about people's work environment that could be positive or negative. And over the last couple of years, labor issues,
Yeah.
organizing,
Yeah.
institutional layoffs, and other business changes also prompts conversation from faculty and staff. And unless an institution is set up with a social intelligence approach, it's often whoever was the loudest voice is what ends up on an administrator's desk, and they have
Hmm.
no idea if it's one loud voice or 100 loud voices, or a bunch of people coming together with a similar thought that as a group should be more heard because they don't have an individual loud voice. So there's definitely things that are seen as more risk to the institution
Yeah.
about the employee experience than a benefit as well.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times best-selling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
You just answered my next question about whether or not the squeaky wheel is what normally gets the attention as far as perceptions of employee satisfaction, especially when it comes to faculty and academic freedom. And now we have faculty, I'm sure you're seeing some of this, who are very concerned about state policies when it comes to DEI and again, issues like tenure and other issues like that, I'm sure is some of the chatter that you're seeing right now. I wanted to go back though and ask you about numbers because you said something with a couple of the examples that you presented that they have low numbers. They're in the low thousands in some places. And I'm curious about that because is this something that should be seen as, for lack of a better term, not a problem, but is it something that that when an institution is saying, "Hey, listen, we have this great faculty member doing some great work, and they have some great conversation going on social media. We need to get them to get their numbers up." And is that really where we need to be in that conversation? Because I'm thinking for faculty, that's a bad conversation to go and start putting pressure on them to quote unquote get their numbers up. What are your thoughts on
Oh, I have thoughts. Um,
that?
so I would see that as an opportunity to leverage networked amplification. So
Mm,
there is there is no reason that the only person who can talk about their research or the employee experience is that person themselves. And there's also no reason that a college or university flagship account or the school or college account dedicated to STEM, whatever that might be, has to write all of their own content.
mhm,
Like, we should be looking at how this campus ecosystem can be displayed online. So there's opportunities to do sharing, co-authoring posts on some platforms that allow it to leverage other platforms and their audiences to get the message out that is otherwise organically occurring. I think it's a very good practice to support employees, including faculty, who want to have a public social media practice so that they feel empowered and not threatened to
mhm,
do so. Like, here are the resources available to you on campus. If you want to know more about campus happenings, we can get you on a special listserv or give you special access to behind the scenes if you want to do those sorts of things. But putting the focus on a follower number is definitely going to put people in an unhelpful space.
Yeah.
And I said those were low numbers. They're low numbers in comparison to what you're looking at in like the influencer engagement
Yeah, absolutely.
industry.
Yep.
In terms of an average human, like the average human has just a couple hundred
Yeah.
connections on most social networks. So as soon as you're in the four digits, you're actually well above average. But it's the full totality of a handful or a dozen, or if you're really lucky at a large institution, hundreds of accounts that have real connections with a few hundred or a few thousand people that will have the network effect of creating that word of mouth brand that you
Hmm.
want. So it's about empowering and amplifying those that are there and not getting stuck on vanity metrics.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that question, Liz, is to me this could really throw a wrench in the talent experience for faculty. Or if you have that high performing staff member who has all kinds of really cool stuff that they're doing, that could really contribute to the brand of the institution. If the institution comes back, if the Marcom office comes back to them and says, "Ooh, this is really nice what you're doing. We need to figure out how to do better. Here's a blog. You need to do a blog." And I know from my experience that when I have approached faculty and staff that way, there's been this recoil effect. And what I didn't realize that I was doing at the time was kind of I was actually kind of ruining the talent experience for them without realizing I was doing it, because I was asking them to do something that was really honestly just one more thing for them to do on top of all the research, on top of all the grants, on
Mm-hmm.
top of having to teach and overload, on top of all of these things that I did not realize they were already dealing with. And so that's why I was wondering about, the maybe the institutional perception of those low thousands numbers. And institutions do get distracted by what they see in the influencer community. People may not realize
Yep.
that, but they do. But that's why I was wondering how that would affect the talent experience for them. Another another point that you made that I think is absolutely fascinating, and this is a part of the talent experience that I'm really hoping that colleges and universities are taking a look at, when it comes to social intelligence, even if they don't realize they're doing social intelligence. But um Gen Z, you brought up Gen Z and their desire for workplace safety. um, I have got to imagine that there are Gen Zers investigating hard colleges and universities that they want to look at, and it could be the difference between getting that Gen Zer who's going to apply so that they are invested in the experience, or they're applying and you're going to wind up renting them for about 1 to 2 years. Any additional insights that you have about Gen Z and the way that they're using social media, if you have these insights or these thoughts about how they're using social media to investigate employment opportunities at colleges and universities.
Yeah, and specifically when we're talking about like workplace safety, we're talking about not only literal physical safety, which is a whole other podcast,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
psychological safety.
That's the
And
safety
I
I'm
don't.
talking about. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
And just in case listeners aren't familiar with that term, it's been coming up a lot more lately, but it was actually coined, gosh, Amy Edmondson at the Harvard Business School has been
Hmm.
studying psychological safety for
Hmm.
decades. And psychological safety is all about interpersonal safety at work. Comfortable expressing yourself, you feel that it's safe for interpersonal risk taking, that you feel comfortable sharing concerns and mistakes without fear of embarrassment or retribution. And that is what Gen Z is looking for. And I recently gave a keynote on this, which is why my voice just got so excited, because I'm like, oh, I've been researching this. I am really concerned about the rise of workplace humor or
Hmm.
cubicle comedians on social media that is kind of dark. And it's dark
Hmm.
because it's true in a lot of places. So the expectations of Gen Z around work is very different. They're not only looking for psychological safety, but they're a part of a societal decline in this concept of workism, where work is your full identity of everything
Yep.
that you are.
Yep.
And when they are researching what something looks like online, they are not going to an institution's culture page and taking them at face word, or at face value. They're not going to an owned social media property, say the flagship of the institution, looking at what's posted there and taking that at face value. They are searching the institution's name and nicknames on Reddit, on X, on
Yeah.
TikTok, and they're seeing what other people have to say about it. So that they are seeing what an institution could be missing if they're not invested in social intelligence. And if they find that the signs are all there, that they will find psychological safety, that they'll find a bit of balance, there is a lot of research that has been conducted. The research I reviewed recently in prep for this keynote was from Deloitte, that if you build stronger psychological safety in your organization, that increases multiple measures of inclusion and also has an outsized impact on retention for marginalized groups.
Hmm.
So, for example, someone who's a member of the LGBTQ community is 6.2 times more likely to be retained in a job if they feel psychologically safe.
Yeah.
So, and that continues on for populations of color, for women, for people with disabilities,
Hmm.
and that shows up in the online conversation. And if they find nothing, they will investigate elsewhere. But if they find something overtly positive or negative, I fully expect that to impact application and employment decisions.
Okay, you sparked something else here. Reddit. You've mentioned
Yes,
Reddit
sir.
several times. I posted one day on social media that HBCUs really need to get serious about taking a look at the activity on Reddit. I actually am part of an HBCU community, or at least I'm following HBCU community on Reddit. And there are so many questions that students have. Especially, I've noticed an uptick of white students asking, would I be accepted at an HBCU? And
Ooh.
I'm sitting there as someone who used to work at who used to work at three HBCUs, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, now if I really wanted to apply for an HBCU, would I be at a place that matches my values? Because I love DEI and I want to see someone answer these students' questions. I want to see someone say, well, this is what you need to consider. And I want to say this, the folks, a lot of the folks, there are a lot of folks who answer questions about HBCUs who are HBCU alumni in that community, and they're very thoughtful in their answers. I'm actually very proud of the way they approach a lot of these questions. And there are a lot of LGBTQ students who are asking, would I be safe at an HBCU? And so Reddit is fascinating to me. And I can only imagine for someone who's thinking about applying for a job at a particular college and university, if they're moving around Reddit and the institution has no idea the potential job candidates are moving around Reddit and they are looking into this, I've got to think that there's a huge missed opportunity for a lot of colleges and universities there.
Oh, yeah. We recently did some industry research at Campus Sonar on public trust in higher education. And we looked at 6 months of conversation about the value, worth, and purpose of a degree that was already out there on the internet. And if I remember correctly, about 44% of that conversation was on Reddit.
Wow.
And that is where a lot of these conversations were happening. And most administrators, hiring managers are surprised at the volume and frequency of conversation on that platform. I just pulled up the latest Pew Research data. They put out a study in January of 2024 with the latest age based demographics. 44% of users 18 to 29, so high employee market,
Yeah.
are using Reddit. 44% compared to 11% of those 50 to 64, or 3% of those 65 plus. It is literally a different world in how people use that platform. And the other thing I'm fascinated by, I wrote about this earlier this year, Reddit's data set is not only particularly valuable to organizations who want to understand how they and organizations like them are portrayed there and what questions are asked from them, because it is such a rich set of unprompted consumer
Yeah.
data, sentiment
Hmm.
questions. They can be very long posts, rich comment threads. one of the revenue sources that Reddit revealed in its latest IPO was all of this data is being sold to train AI models. And I think
Mm,
about the amount of conversation about college, career, and employment on Reddit that is then going to be feeding AI models and bots that people are going to be using to make their college choice and their
yeah.
employment decisions, where we have the opportunity with social intelligence to be ahead of that, or we can be further disrupted when Google and others create their own products driven by that consumer conversation.
This is a fascinating conversation. Social media, yes, but also reviews in places like Glassdoor, Indeed, other places like that. In conversations that you've had with colleges and universities about some of the employee or potential employee chatter, how much attention or how much attention is given to places where employee reviews happen?
You don't know how I'm going to answer this. I think it might surprise at least some listeners, probably not you, Eddie. We work with marketing leaders, admissions leaders, sometimes student affairs leaders, occasionally in the president's office. I don't think we've ever been asked about an employee experience or an employee review.
Okay, even I'm surprised by that. I mean, I would think I would think that the answer a lot of times would be, "Oh yeah, 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 we did see a couple of things," and what I did think the response would be, "Well, that person they got fired because blah blah blah, and they're just upset." And that's really what I expected to hear, but I did not expect to hear that no one has ever asked you about it at all.
It's possible it came up in a side conversation I was not a part of, but it has never been discussed at the company level as something a client was interested in understanding. Again,
Right.
when there are squeaky wheels because of labor activity, academic program cuts, etc., suddenly everyone wants to know what people are saying about it at that point in time.
Mhm.
But long term, how are we showing up on these review sites, or what is the sentiment from our employees? We have never had somebody focus in on that.
It's troublesome though because it does present a little bit of evidence that colleges and universities really need to pay much more attention to not only their potential candidates, but they really need to pay attention. And I say this all the time to current employees, but then they also need to pay attention to how current employees leave and or how employees leave. And one thing that job seekers are almost trained to do, I mean, especially if they have someone who is talking to them about wanting to work at a particular institution, employees almost always go to places like Glassdoor, Indeed. They go any place there's an employee review, Rate My Professor. I mean, they go to
Mm-hmm.
all these different places because they want to know the details. They want to know. They want to know because in a lot of cases, Liz, I mean, folks know if they're applying for jobs in higher education, there are a lot of people out there who do know that they're not probably going to make the kind of money that they like to make. A lot of folks don't know that, but there are folks who do know that. And even among the crowd, because I've been asked these questions, even among the crowd who they don't know they're going to make a lot of money, they at least they know they're not going to make a lot of money, they at least go because they want to get an idea for whether or not, and this is a term we were not using, but they do want to know whether or not there is psychological safety there. They do want to know that it's going to be a fun environment, or they want to know it's going to be a fair environment. That's all they want
Mm-hmm.
to know. So that's freaky.
My suspicion is
Mhm.
that that is a concern that is siloed within HR at
Yeah.
this point in time,
Yep.
where the experience that is impacting it is distributed all throughout the institution, and no one's really gotten together to discuss how they might gather that information at scale or compare it to other data sets, etc.
So in these conversations, do you get the sense that HR is like its own little universe that nobody even deals with in some cases?
I absolutely get that sense.
Oh man.
And when I've talked to people who are committed about building really great employee environments or recruitment processes in higher education, HR is often seen as an adversary, not an ally in doing that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother interview. Okay, that is fascinating to me. So let's look at the way forward. Something that I love to ask my guests about. What are some of the initial considerations that administrations should make so that they can infuse social intelligence into their talent attraction and their talent experience strategies? What would some of those considerations be for you?
Yeah, so first of all, I do think we all need to level up and recognize that more than half of word of mouth conversation is online right now. So if you really want to understand the reputation of your organization with multiple audiences, students, alumni, employees, the community, as well as identify who or what is driving or threatening that reputation, you have to be considering social intelligence as part of not just a market research strategy, but frankly, a risk management strategy. Last week, I was
Mhm.
speaking with trustees around the country, and they were very concerned with how do we real time monitor risk in the social environment that we're in. And social intelligence is absolutely one of the ways to do that. And then you don't have to worry about the squeaky wheel, right?
Mhm.
You can see opportunities and threats as they present themselves. Alongside that, I think it's really important using whatever resources are available. That's not always Campus Sonar for organizations to listen in the spaces that they are talked about, whether that is TikTok, X, LinkedIn, etc., so that your institutional accounts can amplify positive employee conversation. I truly think that that is going to be more effective than spending more time writing content about what's happening on campus. It's the show rather
Mm.
than tell mentality, using real people who are already sharing publicly. And then for those who are sharing publicly, if you're thinking along the lines of, well, how do I enhance our employee reputation, or build this into talent attraction? How do we consider what employee experience looks like online as a whole? Work with a coalition of the willing. Not every employee wants to be on social media. So spending your
Mhm.
time rolling out the what it's like to work here hashtag to the whole campus might not be the best first step, but you can help the people who are already willing and already out there connect their online presence with where they work if they want to, make sure they have guidance and tools and access so that there's something in it for them and the personal brand that they are trying to build, while there's also something in it for the institution. I think those are, three good steps forward.
I really hate to end the conversation the way I'm about to end it,
Oh,
but
bring it, Eddie.
this happened between me and Jenny when we talked, and we completely forgot about the Facebook effect here because isn't that where people are writing their dissertations about the bad day at work that they had? But seriously, I mean, like people are spilling serious tea on Facebook with one another about what happened at work. What's it like working at this college? What's it like? What is it y'all don't know about this president? Here, let me tell you a few things, or they're even writing their dissertations about, you know what? Let me tell you one of the most underrated places to work. I mean, I'm seeing these conversations happen, and it's so funny to me, Liz, how we have all these conversations. We've talked about X, we've talked about Reddit, we have not talked about Facebook, which is still a factor, a huge factor
Oh yeah,
in any kind
still
of
a factor.
conversation. Yeah.
Go back to the Pew demographics, and the numbers for Facebook for the 18 to 29 demographic right now is 67% are using that. So they're beat by Instagram in that age group, but
Hmm.
Facebook is still there. So absolutely, these conversations are happening on Facebook as well. From a social intelligence perspective, Facebook is a walled garden. They do not allow access to their data. You
Yep.
cannot look at it at scale. And I hope that that doesn't deter people from looking and understanding where they can.
Yeah.
If you were able to look behind 10 of 12 doors in a hallway to understand who your community is that's living there, would you not look at all because you couldn't see
Yeah.
behind the two? Or would you look in the 10? And it's absolutely something that is impacting people. The other thing I would throw out there is we have seen, because most people are using multiple social networks, the trends and themes that we see in Reddit, X, tend to mirror similar trends that you would see in other platforms.
Hmm.
And there are other researchers who've done studies that come to that conclusion. It's not the exact same conversations, but the trends are not likely to be drastically different.
Okay. All right. Now I'm satisfied.
Good.
No, I mean, Liz, the insights here have been astounding to me, and I'm still stuck on that whole folks not even asking about employee reviews. That is astounding to me. But Liz Gross is the founder and CEO of Campus Sonar. Liz, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation on I Want to Work There.
Thank you, Eddie.
I Want to Work There is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Mallory Wilsey, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbles, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.